Hi, folks. Rick Wedell here. I'm the Chief Investment Officer at RFG Advisory in Birmingham. And today I thought I'd come to you with a quick update on everyone's favorite topic, which is Bitcoin. I've gotten a lot of inbound questions. It's one of the most common questions that we get asked about around here. What do you think of Bitcoin? How does it work? Should we be invested? All of those types of things. And I thought that it would be worth just sort of blasting out a video to sort of address, how at least I think about Bitcoin. I'm not the only person that has thoughts on the topic, but I'll tell you at least how I think about it. Bitcoin is a currency. I think it's safe to say that it's achieved enough penetration around the world that it can be labeled truly as a currency at this point, much like the US dollar or the Swiss franc or the Great British Pound or the euro or any one of these other currencies that are out there. And, what do people do with a currency? They use it, they exchange it for goods and services. It simplifies the transaction when, you are, I don't know, if I'm a farmer and I bring chickens into the marketplace and I need to buy, cloth to clothe my family, having money to facilitate that exchange, makes things a lot easier so that I'm not trying to trade in, increments of the chicken that I brought with me. So money's good. But money in and of itself is not an investment asset in the same way that stocks and bonds are, right? So if you think about purchasing the equity securities of a company generally is in the business of making profits and distributing those profits to their shareholders. So when you buy the shares of, Delta Airlines or Amazon or any one of the other companies that are out there, the idea is that you have bought fractional ownership in this company. This company makes a certain amount of money every year. And the company will then reward you as an owner of it by distributing to you some portion of its earnings, either in dividends or by reinvesting those earnings into continuing to grow the company. Similarly, if you buy a CD or a bond or any one of those other types of instruments, you are loaning someone some money and they agree to repay you with interest. And that's where we really get the concept of an investment, right? If you think about an investment in the context of, just the Webster's definition, you would generally find this notion that you are investing money, you're buying something in the hopes of returning more than what you actually put into it. This is a little different than what we typically think of as currency trades and or commodities trades. And so I'll use gold as an example. When people buy gold as an investment, they may be thinking that the gold might increase in value. However, what they are more likely thinking is that gold is a safe store of value that provides sort of a flight to safety risk off type trade. In other words, it's a commodity, it's valuable. If the stock market corrects or if the bond market corrects, I've got this commodity that I will be able to use in the place of these investments that I've made. It's a diversifying asset. And similar to saying, okay, look, I'm not, super fond of the US dollar, or I'm not super fond of the Mexican peso or, any one of the other currencies around the world. You may choose to not hold those currencies and buy a different currency in the sense that you may be trying to protect against a fall in value by buying a safe stock and security. And crypto can kind of fall into the same way. If you think about the way in which cryptocurrencies are designed, they are very much designed to be a non-manipulable store of value. There's only so many coins that are out there. There's only so many digital trading cards, if you will. So if I own one of them, there can't be created another, and I will be able to use that to trade with my friends in a way that stores value. The government can't print more of it. I'm not subject to the whims of the Fed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Which I think as a theoretical underpinning, has just as much viability as owning gold or silver or one of these other currencies that are out there. But this is where we get to the but. I do think that cryptocurrencies are here to stay. I do think that we are starting to see wider spread adoption. MasterCard has announced that they, may be willing to accept them in terms of some form of payment transactions. We're going to see the ability of people to be able to pay for goods and services in Bitcoin kind of increase over time. And they are getting more mainstream penetration. However, when people come to me and say, should I own Bitcoin? The immediate question that I ask is, okay, well, Bitcoin is a currency. It's not something that produces profit in and of itself. So first and foremost, if you're thinking about owning Bitcoin, maybe you should think about owning gold or platinum or silver or one of the other commodities that is out there, because they are also a safe, well-established store of value that may act as a counterbalance to some of the more volatile things in your portfolio. The immediate concern that I get back on that is, well, I don't want to own any of those things. I want to own Bitcoin or one of the other cryptocurrencies. And the answer that I respond back to them is, okay, why? And the immediate response that you get is, well, because Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies seem to be skyrocketing in value, and gold and platinum and silver are very boring. And that is the point at which we have crossed over from an investment to speculation. You are now not owning the asset because of what it will, quote unquote, do for your portfolio from a portfolio design standpoint. You are owning it because you believe that it will continue to increase in value, which is purely a bet, since Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies don't pay interest and don't generate profits of themselves. It is purely a bet that someone after you will be willing to pay more for it than what you paid for it, which is a dangerous investment thesis to go into the market with. I will just tell you that every bubble in the history of time has been logical to those who were participating in it. So there are certainly those that would look at me and say, hey, you know what, Bitcoin, there's only so many of them. It's going to get widespread adoption. And, we can see $48,000, $50,000, $100,000 for Bitcoin. If you just imagine that half of all transactions in the United States, or a quarter of all transactions, or even a tenth of all transactions in the United States are carried out using Bitcoin because there just aren't that many of them, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I grant you that seems like an argument that we could play out to its logical conclusion. However, I would also go back and reference just the first bubble of all time, which was the Dutch tulip bubble. A lot of people look back in history now and say, why in God's name in the 1600s would someone have paid the moral equivalent of 2 to 3 years' salary for a flower bulb? That seems ridiculous. But if you go back to the time, you'll see that these weren't just regular tulip bulbs. They were tulip bulbs that sprouted into flowers that had multiple different colors in the petals. So reds and yellows and oranges and purples and all of these brilliant, vibrant colors. And if you know anything about botany, you'll know that it actually takes several years to grow a tulip like that. Several years of very careful crossbreeding, because it takes at least a generation to get that first hybrid morph. And so if you're trying to breed a flower that has all of these unique characteristics, there's a very limited supply of them, particularly if you're a middle class or upper middle class nobleman that wants to demonstrate to all of his friends that you can afford these very expensive flowers in your yard and around your property. And so there's a scarcity value to those flower bulbs that didn't exist. And much like the current craze, there is new trading technologies that are introduced to basically facilitate the buying and selling of these things. There are futures markets that were introduced. There were options markets that were introduced, various ways in which you could buy these flower bulbs, never take possession of them, and turn around and sell them on the other side of it based on the price of an underlying commodity. that didn't trade as much as people maybe thought it would. And so at the time, people looked at these trading in flower bulbs and said, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. The nobles want them. They're a luxury good in the same way that today we would look at luxury watches or luxury cars. There's always going to be a demand for those things. And so it completely makes sense that if it takes 4 or 5 years to produce one of these flower bulbs, that somebody might pay a significant amount of money for them because there's a very constrained supply of them. And it's only now with 400 plus years of hindsight that we can look back and say, actually, that seems ridiculous that someone would pay 3 years of salary for a flower bulb. So if I had been alive in the 1600s and someone had come to me and asked me about, paying, 3 or 4 times, an annual salary for a flower bulb, I guess I would ask them, okay, well, why are we buying the flower bulb? Are we buying it because it looks nice in our garden? In other words, are we buying that cryptocurrency because it's going to fulfill the role of a currency or gold or the Swiss franc or something else like that in your portfolio, and that's why you're diversifying into it? Or are you buying it because you're convinced that it's just going to keep increasing in value? Because if we're buying the flower bulb because we're just convinced that it's going to keep increasing in value, I would worry that we are making a very dangerous bet with the assets that are in our portfolio. So with that, as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or to your advisor. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.